time for the nitty-gritty. Conversations get real live, it's time for the nitty-gritty. The revolution's not televised, it's time for the nitty-gritty. Reaching out to your conscious mind, it's time for the nitty-gritty. More than talking and taking action, it's time for the nitty-gritty.
Facebook, we up! So this is Knock Knock by Matt Martians off his Last Party album. Who's running the music arrangements for the internet?
It has that internet vibe.
Yeah. Actually, I feel like Matt Martian's stuff go harder than the stuff that Sid has done. What's up, Layla? How you doing, girl? Layla? I said Layla because see, I'm looking at the thing directly. My bad. Layla, what's up? Lana. Why do I always say her name wrong? Lana gonna pop me across my head one of these days. And I'm about to catch that whole foot and I ain't gonna be able to say nothing about it. Lana. But I always get thrown off because I'll be looking at the IG. My bad, Lana. What's up, girl, though?
I'm happy to get that. Yeah, that's pretty dope. I've heard.
Yeah. Matt Martians is a beast, you know what I'm saying? So I figured, I'll play a little Matt before we get started. Before 8 p.m. Y'all know how we do the nitty gritty. We jam out a little bit before we get live, you know? Today, we are talking about Black First. About like first accomplishments, first to fill a role, first to accomplish or to achieve a certain thing. We're also going to be talking about gentrification for those in light of the situation at Howard or some of the other things taking place here in DC. So that's going to be fun. I got Sven, Waweru. Did I see your last name right? Close enough?
Yeah.
Alright, I tried. Were you the campaign manager for Kelly Fox? Yeah, so campaign manager for Kelly Fox. He was campaigning for the 43rd district out there in Baltimore, right? Are you guys gonna run again next time around?
I'm not sure. I think right now Kelly is just focused on actually doing the work and the actions in the community.
Yeah.
So, putting words to action. So we talked a lot about community involvement and community interaction. And so right now, that's exactly what he's doing because unfortunately, some of the things you see with a lot of politicians is you see a lot of talk and then it's like
if things will go their way, it's like I'm gone. Yeah.
So
that's what happened when real ones run for office. You know what I'm saying? They get involved with the community, so that's important.
Yeah. So he's been doing a lot of hard work. He actually I saw he did so in the 43rd district they did a kind of like a setup outside, did a giveaway for like food and clothes and things like that.
Oh, dope. What's up, everybody? We're about to go live here soon. Got my man Sven with me over here in the den. TNGS, baby. I'm gonna have you sign that too before you leave. Okay. So what we've been doing is we've been having people sign the wall. Alright. Yeah. It's gonna be epic one day. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So when you guys go on 10 years from now, you're a millionaire. I can be like, hey, remember when you signed the wall? Can I get a loan?
Right.
You remember me, right?
Yeah.
The show called Nitty Gritty. Yeah, so of course, Kat's not with us, but she's gonna be chiming in. You know, she's here. She's always here. You know, so Kat's always here, either in spirit or just offside the camera right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna have a good time today. And it's 8 o'clock, so you already know what time it is. We're gonna turn this music down, and we about to get down to the nitty gritty. It's your boy JD Costa. Your girl Katniss can't be here today. It's the guys' night, but she's still here in the building, so she's with us in spirit. And you'll probably still hear her voice across the camera. But we're about to get down to it. Today, I have Sven Waweru with me. All right, educated brother, went to the University of Maryland. Worked on Kelly Fox's campaign. He was the campaign manager. All right, little known fact, he's from this fraternity concept.
What was that?
There's a little fraternity called Phi Beta Sigma. Y'all might have heard of it. You know what I'm saying? I was messing around. Shout out Kelly. You know what I'm saying? Also Phi Beta Sigma, right? So that's dope. So very happy to have you on. Smart brother. Had a lot of conversations with this cat. We used to work together once upon a time. He's gone on to do bigger and better things. You know how that's what excellence looks like in the black community. But happy to have you in the den. We've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah, happy to be here, man.
Yeah, and technically you've been on the show when we did the interview with Kelly Fox.
Yeah, well, I was
you got to chime in. Yeah, but I mean, so you've been around the atmosphere. You know what it is.
For sure.
Were you on the live show back when we was in DC? Were you on that? Did you come on live, or was it just Kelly that came on?
No, that was Kelly that came on.
Okay, so I remember you was there.
Yeah, I was there. I was in the building.
Yeah. So he's been around TNGS for a while, so he's not really a stranger to us. You know what I'm saying? This feel like this is family right here. You know, this is the first time y'all get to see him first right, center phase. So this is dope. Today we're going to be talking about Black First once again. If you're just chiming in, what's up, Jeff? We're going to be talking about Black First. So we're going to hit that from a couple of different angles. And then also we're going to be talking about gentrification. Like a lot of times people feel like, oh, that's just a beat up, overdone conversation. But then when you see the situations that have recently gone on at Howard University, right, or right here in DC, with the T-Mobile store right there on 9th and Florida Avenue, then you realize it's still an issue, and it's more abhorrent than I think we thought it was. At first, I thought it was just like they don't realize they're blowing up old black property and parts of the community that have a precious place in our history and in our hearts. But then it gets to a disrespectful level. So we're gonna challenge that, and we're gonna try to cut a little early tonight, like around maybe 15 minutes till, because some of us over here are Game of Thrones fans, and we're looking forward to that hour and 22-minute long episode. So I can't wait. I'm thirsty for that. So jumping right into it, first thing, talking about Black First. This conversation was brought on because what happened is I was on IG, right? I'm looking through the TNGS IG, and I see that there was a sister that became the first black woman to achieve her doctor's degree in like aerospace or technology, something along that line. Like
first PhD, I believe it was.
First PhD, right, in that field. And I was like, man. So my first thought when I saw it was like, obviously double like the joint, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, man, this is great. But then at the same time, I started thinking like, why is this the first time this is happening? If you watch movies like Hidden Figures, you see that we've been working behind the scenes for a very long time. We've had a few black astronauts, not enough. And it's kind of like, dang, we really got Black First in this country. You have the young man that became the first black mayor in St. Paul, Minnesota. I think we had the first black mayor in a couple other Midwestern cities. We still, in Maryland, as we was talking earlier, we haven't had a black governor yet in Maryland.
Right.
So it's kind of like, while I'm proud as a black man to say, like, man, it's good to have these Black First. But at the same time, I'm like, man, we got such a long way to go.
Yeah, so I think it's important to just emphasize that. So, cause sometimes you see a lot of people, like, especially since the whole Barack Obama's first black president has occurred in 2008, you get a lot of the fatigue of why are we still talking about Black First? But just like you said, with the young lady who earned her PhD, it's still important because they're still happening. And so it's still something that needs to be celebrated and recognized, because if you don't highlight those accomplishments, then people won't know. And it's easy to take for granted. But I think one of the important things to underscore is also that when you see something like that come up and you're like, oh wow, I didn't really know that, I didn't realize that. It also kind of helps you it also kind of helps people to pay attention to it and start asking those questions, like you said, like, why is that the case? Is it just kind of the fruits of the of racism and things like that have occurred in our country that still kind of exist, or is it just that there hasn't been a lot of interest or steering of people of black people into those fields? So. Yeah,
and I want to talk about that too, because I think there is an obvious racial component in that, right? That obviously, and we were talking about this before the show, and I think you made a great point. You were talking about like how blacks that go to like a typical PWI, you're in a hard place. Because when these top law firms or these top jobs are recruiting for talent, I'm stealing your words. But this is what you said, and you're right. It's a lot of times, and I mean, me and Katrina talked about this because she did a semester at Spelman. That so now you're gonna jump in, and then I gotta rearrange everything the last minute. You see how black folks do?
Oh yeah, I can talk about this, but go ahead.
All right, hold on. Let me readjust at the last minute.
Oh, okay.
There we go. No shade. Just just talking about how we got to do things at the last minute. It's cool. All right, so we got Katrina with us right now. Say hi, Katrina. Katniss. All right. So what we were just talking about was, and Katrina, you spent a semester at Spelman, so you can relate to this about we were talking about like that aspect of Black First and just this idea of like we're just getting people into these Black First. And you know, Sven was talking earlier before the show about, and he made a good point because we've had this conversation before about a lot of times when these top companies are recruiting talent, they're either going to the Ivy Leagues, the Harvards, the Princetons, the Stanfords of the world, and then when they need to fill their quota, they go to an HBCU. But then they're not going to all HBCUs. Like they're not going to TSU. They're not going to like Alabama State, or they're not going to Copland or whatever. They're going straight to what, maybe FAMU, Morehouse, Howard, maybe Hampton, and Spelman, right? Which is in an Ivy League of its own. So then if you're the Black student that goes to Austin Peay, or you go to Georgetown, or you know Georgetown's kind of up there, or Maryland University, it's kind of like you just kind of fall in the middle or to the wayside, and then you have to deal with this, you know, different ways they try to keep a lot of times minorities or different faces out of certain types of jobs.
Yeah, it's just because by the time they get to a school, you know, certain schools you're squeezed out of the middle because they're not the focus obviously isn't on finding certain like certain minority groups at that time. So because they already know strategically you're going to go to Howard, Morehouse, Spelman to grab, you know, your Black representation, and then they're going to go to the schools that they're used to going to, like your Harvards and Stanfords of the world, to grab, you know, the pedigree that they're looking for. By the time they get to a school like something like an Austin Peay or like a Maryland or something like that, it's already they're not necessarily looking to find that. They're just looking to fill in the gap.
Exactly.
So it's a little harder because you're not at the Harvard where you're going to get that pedigree and you can stand on that, and you're also not at, you know, like a Morehouse where you can stand on one, that pedigree, but also two, the fact that they're there explicitly to find someone like you. So you have to kind of work harder to stand out, and that's just from the experience that I know from my friends who, in the situation we were talking about, was like trying to get to those bulge bracket firms on Wall Street. So
yeah.
Also, I mean, I did a senior thesis on this.
Oh, nice.
I never told one that. So my senior year of undergrad, one of the reasons why I went to Spelman was because my senior thesis was comparing Black success, whether or not a PWI is better or HBCU. Both have their pros and cons, certainly. But it's funny because when I was at Ohio Wesleyan University, I had applied to so many internships, good ones too, never even thought to get even a nod. But then the moment I went to Spelman, I had an internship and was able to, I was away in East Palo Alto, so I was near like a lot of like your Stanford, your IT people. And all my friends who went to HBCUs had internships at like Boeing after college because they interned there, they had a guaranteed job as well. And pretty much, like you said, it's because a lot of these corporations don't really want to take the time to really look through various applicants, so they go to said HBCU and fill their quota. In fact, when I did my internship, all of the Black people who were there were from Spelman and Morehouse. So they didn't even look at anybody else. It was like, oh, we picked 5 people here, 5 people there. We had our quota for Black folks. So I think that with this knowledge, we need to pass it down to our kids and be very strategic about, one, the college that we select, and two, understanding that if you're going to go to a HBCU, no shade to any of the other ones, you probably should try to ensure that your kid gets into the top HBCUs, because to me it's kind of pointless to go to an HBCU that's not going to put you in a position to get a good, you know, career after college. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just feel like it's pointless because half the time you're already in debt because HBCUs don't give out that much money, and then there's already the stigma that they're not going to teach you as great as a you know, a Georgetown would, which we know is not necessarily true. So
yeah, because at the end of the day, calculus 2 is calculus 2. It hasn't changed in 150 years, so it doesn't matter where you go to learn it. You're gonna get the same education. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think one of the interesting points you touched on is that there's still, even within the HBCUs, there's still this dynamic of a hierarchy of schools where there's certain schools that are these marquee schools, so to speak. So you know, you have your Howards, your Morehouses, and your Spelmans that stand on their reputation, and part of that is their alumni base.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, one of the things I know, so one of the interesting things, like when I was at Maryland's business school was ranked higher than Georgetown's, for example. But when you went to Georgetown's career fair, they still had all of those bulge bracket firms there because they had a strong alumni base. And you knew this because one of the things that Georgetown did, which was very smart, is every recruiter at one of those companies that was there, if they were a Georgetown alum, they had a super big button that says, "I'm a Hoya." And probably 70% of them had at least one recruiter there that said, "Hey, I'm a Hoya." So which was very different experience in Maryland. So.
Yeah, and I think something else to bring up there, you know, I think you guys hit it really nice with the various. Chris shouting out his alma mater, Tuskegee. That's what's up.
Okay.
Liz went to Tuskegee. There is one thing I want to say about HBCUs because I feel like I'm the only person on the panel. Well, no, Juan, you went to PWI and HBCU.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like when I went to Spelman, I learned more in that one semester than I did at Ohio West. And I'm not saying, when I say learn more, what do you mean? Like, I'm not talking about just like books or curriculum. I'm talking about like learning about myself. And I remember my professors really caring about like my well-being and my knowledge. I think I turned in a paper and I had a black professor who was actually my soror, and it wasn't good. And she said, "Can I see you after class?" And this is the first time she was like, "This paper wasn't terrible, but it wasn't your best. And I feel like I would like for you to redo it again. Here are some peer-reviewed journals that you can use that help, fluff it up. Normally I don't do this, but I feel like because you're my soror, you are capable of doing better." To me, that kind of infrastructure of like having a little more love, I think, is beneficial for a lot of black folks because a lot of us after the undergrad experience go to your competitive, Georgetowns, and it's kind of a more hostile environment, and I feel like it kind of helps you prepare because like when I went to Spelman, they told us like, you are the best, you are the cream of the crop, there's no other institution that's going to prepare you as a black woman better than Spelman. Like you are a Spelman Knight. And I was just like, all of my insecurities from being at this PWI, I felt loved, I felt accepted, I felt like, oh wow, they think I'm really smart, because at other school, clearly they were like, made me feel like not only was I not smart, but that I was not even at a college level for reading, math, arithmetic, like none of that. Like I feel like, I'm being completely transparent, but I feel like when I got to college, I was behind.
Yeah, that's a whole another conversation.
I felt behind.
Yeah.
Chris asked the question, Katrina, why isn't that the AUC more involved in the surrounding community?
You're talking about down in Atlanta, the AUC in Atlanta. I'm assuming he's talking about that.
I guess so.
Yeah. That's what it's called. Well, for one, as we know, Morris Brown is not accredited anymore, although you can take classes there, which is strange. Spelman's biggest donor, believe it or not, was the Cosbys, but ever since the scandal, they've now don't accept donations from the Cosbys anymore, and the building has been renamed. And then Clark Atlanta, I don't really know what's going on with them, but I think that back to the larger point that I heard you guys touch on, alumni are not giving back to these schools like that. Well, Spelman, I think they give back, but if you're not giving back, you're not pouring into the community, or you're not even going back to maybe even work for the school or whatever, I feel like it kind of loses some of its like luster and appeal, and in turn I feel like it kind of affects the morale and the standard of the school. I mean, back to Sven, most of the time Spelman, Morehouse, Howard, the reason why there is such a high morale or it's looked in high regard mainly is because of their alumni. We can't say that present day that these are just the bomb end all be all, or that they are at the standard that they probably once were back in the 80s where people really didn't have the option to go to your top tier PWIs. But I just wanted to just touch on that. Like, I feel like I was built up better at an HBCU, and I actually preferred. My parents didn't go to HBCU, so like I feel like we were kind of ignorant to how beneficial they were. I never even had applied, and I tried to stay at Spelman, but they didn't give me the funding, unfortunately. But I'm grateful for the semester that I had there. But
I'll chime in and then kind of get us back to the Blacks First conversation. You guys make good points about education and the role it plays. But I think also something that Sven had touched on earlier was like the steering to certain types of professions while we're just becoming the Black First. And I think when it comes to the steering, I think it's a two-part thing. There is obviously a racial component, right, where they've tried to strategically or systematically be proven where blacks have been kept out of certain types of industries. And we see it today, even in workplaces now, where there'll be certain aspects of a company, retail and call centers that are very diverse or are black, and then once you start getting into the business to business or the technical end or the financial end of a company, it gets less and less diverse, right?
Can I touch on that? It's like really quickly.
Go ahead.
Something about the call center thing. Lately, I don't want to say what, but lately I've been hearing that feedback is, oh, this call center isn't professional due to how we answer the phone. Kind of like, what's the movie called?
I'm going to say this will be really quick. You really just steered us off. Go ahead.
No, it is quick. What's that movie called?
Sorry
about you.
Yes, that's it. So with call centers, as diverse as it is, there is a certain standard that you really can't answer the phone the way that you normally would.
It's a cultural difference. It has nothing to do with like what's professionalized. It's just the perception of professionalism based on cultural differences.
You know, using the white voice and the intonations of that too, but yet and still, it can't be that big of an issue because what you do see in the call center is this: they're more so diverse for most companies, but then also you do start seeing other stigmas where towards the top of the leadership it starts becoming less diverse once again, right? So it's kind of like they'll give you a job at a call center all day long. Are you going to be the director of that call center or something different? And you see this across all companies, right? I think the other thing, when we start talking about the steering of certain jobs, there's also the perception that even our own media gives on certain types of jobs, like what's sexy or not. When I say what's sexy, it always sounds good when you say you're a lawyer. You could be a broke lawyer, but the fact that you're a lawyer, everybody's like, ooh, yeah, girl, he a lawyer, you got that, but he only makes $50,000 a year. You know what I'm saying? Because maybe he works for the state. But then on the other end, you know, there's doctor, but then you want to really take on all of that school debt. So yeah, on paper, yeah, you make $250,000, but then at the same time, Sallie Mae gonna own that booty until you're 57 years old. So then we have all the billionaires out there. Most of them don't even have a degree. They quit school early and then went out here and used their business acumen to go out here and create real wealth. And you see that across millionaires as well. And then there's certain types of jobs we don't aspire to have. Typically, you're not going to hear any black boy grow up saying, I want to be a prosecutor. It's very rare that you see any black boy grow up and say, I want to be the chief of police. But when you look at the two positions we should aspire to have to change the culture of police relationships with our black men, why wouldn't we want those jobs? Why wouldn't you want to be a young black person and become a prosecutor? Because at the end of the day, when we're assigning the years tied to a crime, the prosecutor has a lot of power into saying like, yeah, you're going to go to jail for selling an illegal substance in the state of Tennessee, marijuana, but we ain't going to give you 20 years for it. I'm going to ask for...
Isn't trying to make partner and make...
So once again, there is no really making partner if you're a state prosecutor. And then two...
The reason why the prosecutor, I don't mean to interrupt, but the reason why the prosecutor part is, or the state's attorney rather, is super important because in law there's something called prosecutorial discretion. And so like when you see something like, I forget his name, the last name of the kid was Brock, the Stanford swimmer kid who got 6 months for literal rape, versus another scenario where you may have someone who gets 15 years for a lesser crime in the same similar class. It's because the prosecutor, or in the case of the Brock kid, the judge chose to use their discretion and say this kid has potential, so therefore I don't want to ruin his life. We're going to give him a second chance. So when you have a state's attorney who comes from those shared experiences of the community or like of the black community, things like that, they're now in that situation where they can exert that same prosecutorial discretion to say this kid has potential. He wasn't selling whatever illegal drug, debate whether it should be illegal or not, but he wasn't breaking the law, so to speak, because he's a super predator. He was breaking the law because there was a need. He was trying to fill a need. Like his mom works 3 jobs or whatever the scenario is. There's a lacking economically that he was the void that he was trying to fill. He has potential. I'm not going to ruin his life by giving him a record. I'm going to give him this probation and we're going to be able to lead him to the road of expungement.
Exactly.
So that's why.
From a state attorney. That's what you're saying. So you're saying it's likely that if you work for the state, you're going to be probably a little more fair than someone who works for a large firm.
Well, typically a prosecutor is going to work for the state.
Well, not so much that you should be a prosecutor over working at a private firm, but someone who is a black person that comes from that community, has those same shared experiences as a prosecutor, is going to empathize with those people in a way that someone who's not from that community can't empathize with them because they just don't understand it. And it may not even necessarily be callous that that white prosecutor or the Indian prosecutor tends to have that bias, that unconscious bias, but it's just that they don't empathize on the same level that someone from that community, someone with those same shared experiences will empathize.
And to echo that point, and you hit the what they call the nail right on the head. Because we don't go into those things, and kind of echo what Krista said here. He said true urban planners, development managers. These are some of the jobs that we don't go into because it's always pushing us our head. And even minorities suffer the same thing. If you look at the Indian community, if you look at the Oriental-based community backgrounds, a lot of them become doctors and lawyers because that's like the thing to be. Meanwhile, we don't have the voice in the development space. We don't have a voice in the urban planning space. We don't get involved in the urban planning from a constituent base, right? We just let these jobs go ahead. And I've had this conversation countless times, even while playing PUBG online, to all my PUBG family out there that be watching the show. Thank you. But oh, go ahead. But even to that group, when we talk about this, it's true. It's like we don't have enough people from our community aspiring to go into policing. We don't have enough people from our community aspiring to go into the military and aspire to the highest heights of leadership. So then and I say this all the time, me and Katrina was just talking about this the other day, which is, it's one thing to be the black first in this particular place, but then to be a true trailblazer, to say, not only by me being black, that's great, I'm here, but it's another thing to say that I'm black and I'm setting the door for more like me to walk through. Because if you become the first black police chief in a certain town, but you assimilate to the previous misconceptions of black culture, you're not helping the problem. You've only become part of the problem.
Yeah.
And I think the thought process is, the reason why we ignore those other jobs, like being a prosecutor, being the state's attorney or whatever, the reason why we ignore those jobs is like, those are sellout jobs. Meanwhile, more and more black men are just sent to prison because there's no one to look at that and say, hey, you're missing part of the experience. And I think that's why true diversity, I forgot the young lady's name, she's running for president right now, Democratic. Not Kamala Harris. She was a prosecutor too, and that's an important point. The first white one to bring up that she wanted to give out reparations, it was Marianne, you know what I'm talking about? The one that's part of Oprah Super Friends?
Like Klobuchar or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. And she made a good point that diversity isn't adding different types of faces and different types of gender to the conversation, because we would all agree Herman Cain and Ben Carson haven't been the black voices of the community with around Trump, right? So that's not diversity if they all think the same. Diversity is saying, hey, I used the extreme earlier, I'm going to use it again, bring Dr. Umar Johnson to the conversation of education. I don't agree with everything the man says, but that would, that's an extreme, but that represents diversity, because these are someone who won't agree with you because they're trying to tell you, hey, you might want to consider this other opinion. We've had that problem in the clothing industry. They haven't had people who are non-assimilators of the culture to check them and say, hey, this is going to offend black people in America, who, by the way, buy billions of dollars of this product.
Yeah, it's about bringing that experience from that community to the table. So,
exactly.
Like the H&M thing with the monkey shirt.
Yeah, coolest monkey in the jungle.
Yeah, the coolest monkey in the jungle. If you have a table full of people who don't have that cultural experience to say this is going to be offensive, but also on the flip side of that is also on the company to do that research, because when they're taking, so like for example, when Coke decided to go into markets like China, they literally researched how the word Coca-Cola translated into the Chinese language and then altered it slightly to ensure that it doesn't like say something offensive or something like silly.
But it makes you wonder who was sitting on the board of Coca-Cola, or who was high enough up to even make them think, hey, I should consider that.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think it's just it's a complex thing, because on the one hand you have, people have to have seats at the table so they can bring that up and say, I think that like we need to research this point. But then also on the other side of that, the company also has to say, they also have to do the work to say, exactly. Let's make sure, let's double check this and make sure that this is going to play the way that we want it to play.
Exactly. Shout out IG, shout out Uncle Jeff, happy to have you on. I know you'll be watching Game of Thrones tonight. To read a comment from our Facebook audience, Chris McKinney, he said, that's why it's important. Move out the way. That's why it's important for those of us who have, quote unquote, made it to engage in our communities. We can provide exposure and hope to people. And I totally agree with that. And I think a lot of times we're so close, especially like these big cities like New York or DC, LA. I think that we're so detached from people because everybody's kind of like living their own lane. We don't realize how isolated we are and how isolated we push ourselves further to be, right?
Well, yeah, and I think his point is also touching on something that's even more important. It's hard work and it's very forward-thinking work to do that, right?
Yeah.
Because especially if as you were raised, you're raised with this concept of like getting out in order to like, and then that's when you've made it. You want to get the nice house in the community that's not the hood or whatever. So to consciously then go move back into that neighborhood and be that beacon of light or be that example is, I think, tougher. It requires you to think beyond just your own personal comfort.
And I think it just says, and something you said makes me want to segue to the next conversation. But before we go there, it just says that's how important it is for our Black first. It's like
that's a perfect segue.
Yeah. We got to celebrate it, right? And at the same time, there's so much more work to do. So we can't get caught up where we are and forget there's so much further to go. Like the first Black person, period, fighting for the independence of America was Christmas Addicts, died at the Boston Massacre, right? We got to remember that was a Black man. So African Americans, that's just one segment of the minority group, but we all African Americans right here. It just shows how much work we have to do to get to true inclusion and openness about every aspect of this country. And it's going to take us having an open mind to enter certain areas that we didn't consider before. And we're going to have to start lifting up each other or one another to go into those places that weren't considered the sexy job or the cool job to have. You know what I'm saying?
Or even like not even beyond just those type of jobs, but just other industries like venture capital.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, you talk to people about someone being an angel or an angel investor. Sometimes people will look at you like you have 3 heads because they don't know, they're not familiar with it. But Nas actually has an angel investment firm that is like one of the very few Black firms. I mean, anyone that wants to look into like venture capital firm or venture capital work, you'll see, like, I challenge you to Google search any venture capital firm, and you'll see, like, when you look at their team, you'll probably go through 15 websites before you find someone that that's a person of color or Black that's on their leadership board. So.
Exactly. Chris saying that we definitely need more young Black professionals. In Kansas City, I met in St. Louis. Bro, I told you I'm not moving to Kansas City. But I agree with you. We do need more there. You're right. And from where we live to the jobs we take. Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of like the segue. You kind of led to it, which is, like moving out of the hood, as we call the hood, and going to these quote-unquote better neighborhoods. And so I was thinking about this the other day when it comes to like the whole idea of gentrification or us wanting a better neighborhood experience for those of us, young Black professionals, older Black professionals. It's amazing that when white people, I'm just going to call it what it is, this is not to offend anybody, and you shouldn't be offended because these are facts, right? It's not opinion, it's facts. White people move into a neighborhood and they automatically say, I need a Starbucks here. They get involved in the city planning, from a constituent standpoint, not saying they actually run for an office, even though they will, but they just get involved from the city planning, their HOAs, and say, hey, look, I want to vote to get, a Kava in here, because I enjoy Kava. And then also, corporate America responds and say, oh, white people live there now? Let's go ahead and make sure that they have a Target. Let's make sure that they have a Bed Bath & Beyond. Let's make sure that they have a high-end mall, even though when you see high-end clothes from a flashy standpoint, they're more so easily recognized on minorities. But they're not going to build across the street, we got PG Plaza Mall, but they're not going to put a Gucci store in there. Even though if I walk in that mall right now, I guarantee you I'm going to see multiple people rocking Gucci belts. Yeah. Right? And so it's something to say, like, gentrification is very interesting in how it operates, because while it will buy up a Black neighborhood or a minority neighborhood, move all the pieces, all the great things that make that neighborhood unique. We've seen this in Columbia Heights in DC, where you have busboys and poets, you have all these old, jazz clubs and bars that have been Black owned. You have places like the hot dog place. I can't even think of the name of it right now. Yeah. But you get what I'm saying? Like, you have all this great stuff, all this goodness, and people are like, oh, I love the culture there. And then the second they get segmented, it's like, all right, let's move the culture out and make it look like Anywhere USA and put in all the typical stores, and now it's just corporate owned. There's nothing significant or unique about it anymore, right? And I think that's the thing that was so damning. To be a DC native myself, to have my family be 4 generations living here, and to see them say, oh, they don't want go-go music played on Florida and 9th Avenue. And for those that don't know the area, go-go music, for one, is a type of music native to the area. No different if you went to New Orleans and you heard bounce music. Or if you go to New Jersey or Baltimore, you hear house music, right? There are just certain things that give an area identity and it makes it unique. And it's like, yeah, you savor the sounds and the taste of a city. And to move that out and say, well, now that we're here, it's inconvenient for us.
Yeah.
Or it's inconvenient that you're telling me I can't come onto this private institution that's Howard University and I can't let my dog poop on the plot of fraternity. You get what I'm saying? Hella disrespectful. And it's kind of like, they don't have that same energy at Georgetown.
Yeah.
Right around the way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that part of that is like with the guy with the dog.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I thought that was an interesting scenario because I mean, first of all, like you said, before you even get to that point, before you even like get up on the lawn and say, "Oh, I don't care about these fraternity plots or what have you," you're walking onto private property. So there's that, right? Like
it's not a place for you to share. Like his exact words were, we have a finite space and we have to find a way to share this property together. No, if you want more space, you can move to Columbia, Maryland. You can move to PG. You can move to other parts of Montgomery County if you want space for your dog. But you chose to move to DC for whatever reason. Respect what's already there, though.
Right, and even beyond that is, like I said, it's that part of personal choice, and it's like a deviation from his personal choice. When you're buying property or you're choosing to rent property, it's your responsibility to research the area. So
exactly,
his shortfall was he chose to ignore what was there, or he didn't do the research of the area to see that there's a university across the street, and that when you're living in the middle of a city, chances are finding grass for your dog to do his thing on is going to be a tough find. So
yeah, and for all our listeners out there who are white or who watch this and who are white, this is not an attack on whiteness, but these are the things that black people would call white privilege. Because in one breath, you would go to this black historic university and you would force your will as an individual to say, I don't understand why I'm going to go my way. But you won't have that energy towards a Georgetown, which is also a private school. And on top of that, if the situation were reversed, if I was black and I went to a Boston or if I went to a Utah and I was like, yo, I'm not feeling all these Mormon churches. Let's just switch it to my way. People would then understand, yo, that's the history of that city. Why are you doing that? But somehow when it's black or when it's minority or when it's Spanish, we don't see or value the culture within it. To go to the comments real quick, Lana said that met with a woman. She said, I couldn't imagine thinking about successful and moving out of my neighborhood. We were taught to invest into it. Yeah. And that's dope. I mean, it's like, that's the thing I think on our end that we can do better. Katrina made this point. I'm gonna make it for her because she's out there doing her thing. But something that we should consider, and when you look at Howard, it's like, man, Howard has there's so much more room for them to build, and something and it seems to be a theme across the United States. Our HBCUs are selling their property. Right? Meanwhile, PWIs are expanding their property. When I went home to visit family, I think it was Thanksgiving or Christmas, I can't remember which one. And we just happened to ride through Austin Peay. Yeah. And it was like, oh my God, this place has grown and expanded so much. Like, all the old dorms were gone and they had replaced them with newer, bigger ones. And I was like, wow, Austin Peay got some decent alumni, but it ain't that of a Harvard or anything like that. But somehow they're growing that school. These HBCUs like Howard, you have Diddy that's gone there, Felicia Rashad, Taraji, countless and that's just celebrities. We're not even talking about people just behind the scenes that are doing their thing. Yeah. And you look at the school, and just to be honest, nothing against HU because I love you guys even though I'm not an alumni of the school. I love it being from DC. It has a lot of work.
You also want to be careful calling HU. They have some Hampton alum out there. They feel different.
But wasn't Hampton
They may say that's the real HU.
I never understood that debate. Now I don't have a dog in this fight. I didn't know the other one. But correct me if I'm wrong. Hampton used to be Hampton Institute University, right?
Yeah, I believe they started with
it. Used to be HIU. So how are you the original HU? Once upon a time you were HIU, and then Howard's always been like I said, I don't know. It ain't for me.
Shout out to the Hampton alums. But
look, shout out to anybody that went to any school. You know what I'm saying? Because that's dope. You made it, right?
But I think to go back to your point though, I think the importance is the alumni base. So, and it's like so you pointed out like there's a lot of notable or easily recognizable alumni at at Howard, for example, and probably even at Morehouse and everything like that as well. But when it comes to those schools expanding, if it's a private school, part of it has to do with just how much how much is given back and how much is invested back into the school as an alumni. If it's a public school, it's a little different. So like in Maryland, you have the university system, and the University of Maryland College Park is that flagship school. And so I know at one point in time, 10 years ago, all of the investment, or almost all the investment, was going into Maryland, and it was so disproportionate that when like Morgan and Coppin were going to protest in Annapolis about how the budget was distributed, you had kids from College Park that are also going saying, that doesn't make sense that literally our entire campus is being improved and changed simultaneously while Morgan and other schools are being left behind. So I think it depends on like the dynamics of like the type of school, public versus private, but in the private, I think the alumni base really help dictate how that school can grow.
But I think it all comes down to saying this is with both conversations, whether you're talking about Black first and us trying to, for the first time, engage into industries we haven't been a part of, or even if it's the conversation of gentrification in our neighborhoods. The answer to both is engagement, right? It's saying that I'm going to engage in this process of how money is going to be allocated, how it's going to be spent. It's saying I'm going to engage by voting, and then not just voting, but then activating my vote to demand that, hey, I voted on you to get XYZ job done, and you have to get job done. And then the only way to demand that the job is done, you can't just vote. You have to be in the faces of your elected officials. You have to be part of the mechanisms that help drive the change to make anything happen. And I think too often we sit on the sidelines expecting a change, and it just doesn't work that way.
Well, when you quote unquote make it, you have to also reach back and bring people with you. And
Chris had made that comment earlier. Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Right. You can't. That's the thing. Like you can't because if you do that, then everyone gets siloed off. And part of it is having a foundation, and part of having a community is having a foundation, and having that foundation develop and evolve over time. The thing about that, though, is that requires you to think less of yourself. And I think that was what we were talking about before. If you want to see your community build, you have to make moves that you may not see the fruits of in your generation. They may impact 3 generations down the road.
And after you said that, some things take sacrifice, right? Our forefathers, when they were getting sprayed in the street with water hoses, and keep in mind, that wasn't long ago.
No.
You have people like Representative John Lewis, who there's pictures of right now in the African American Museum.
He was there.
Beat up and everything. He was there, and he's still alive.
Yep.
We're not talking about an event that happened that's so like, I can't stand it when people try to act like slavery is so far removed.
No.
When we have grandparents who are the children of slaves, some of them still living, you know, maybe in their 90s and all that stuff, like sharecroppers and all that. So it's like, first of all, it's not that far removed.
Right.
And then so two, it's not saying, and this whole idea to just get over it is crazy, because you'll teach on subjects that, you know, predate some of that. So sacrifice is going to be a big part of it. You know, some things are not going to happen in your lifetime. You're setting the stages for it to happen in someone else's lifetime, but it's a needed thing to go forward. Let me hit Chris' comments. He said, we don't live our lives in an intentional way. I agree. He said, not the way we vote. We are where we buy property, events, meetings, attend, where we live, etc. We've got to find a way to value our own community and culture. And I agree with you. Charlemagne the God says this a lot. You know, you got to go where you're tolerated, not celebrated. You got to go where you're celebrated, not tolerated, right? And sometimes we have to create our own so that way we can celebrate our own. We can't wait for someone to do it for us.
Well, speaking to the voting thing, I think a tough conversation that a lot of people don't want to have is, I mean, so I'm from Baltimore, so I use Baltimore as the example, but Baltimore hasn't had a mayor that wasn't a part of the Democratic Party since the late 60s. And so you look at like the growth that Baltimore has had over that time, and whether you're satisfied or dissatisfied with that growth, you have to ask yourself, how effective is it to have one party? I'm not telling anyone to go register as a Democrat or a Republican, but what I'm saying is when you talk about your vote, and you talk about going where you're celebrated, not tolerated, it's about the value system, and the actions really dictate how you're valued in the scenario. So, so when you talk, so again, I don't want anyone to get triggered and think I'm telling you to go be a Republican. All I'm saying is that you have to begin to ask that question. You have to audit. At some point, you have to do an audit and say, okay, well, how beneficial has this group of people or this ideology been to like the goal of where we're trying to get to?
And no, but you made a good point though, and I've made this comment before to Democrats I know in the area that have gone for different elected positions and all that, and I've made the comment, and they don't really agree with it when I say it, but there's got to be some sense to it. So one, I think a lot of times we do blindly vote Democrat. And what I mean by blindly is most people don't engage into the process early enough to put in a Democrat that would represent the ideas of change that we want, right? So like for instance, like there's people right now, I've heard people say very ignorantly, and if you're one of them, I'm calling you out for a reason. Don't say something stupid like, oh, I'm not paying politics right now because there's just too many Democrats. And I'm just going to wait till it thin out. The issue is when you wait till it thins out, what happens is the louder voices or the louder thought processes in the party or the people who engage early give you a limited choice on who's going to represent you. Because you're going to vote Democrat anyways, right? Yeah. But now you're not even allowing your voice to be heard. They give a wider scope of ideas and changes that can represent what you want for yourself and your community.
And you should also give politicians who may be saying something that you disagree with a chance, or just people who have different ideas a chance, because you never know. They may school you to something or a thought process or perspective that you never thought about. You're like, oh, I never thought about it that way.
Exactly.
That
so
makes sense.
You have to have that. Also, and I know a lot of people might kill me in the comments for it, but you know, half of y'all that are gonna get mad don't even vote. So who really cares, right? But if you live in a Tennessee or like maybe parts of like Alabama, maybe some areas that are not willing to change, like we saw the opportunities in Florida and Georgia, but maybe it is strategic to vote Republican. And once again, it goes back to what I said earlier. Some areas of life we need to enter, not because we want to assimilate to the culture that's there, but sometimes you want to be that tool of change, the catalyst of change, to move something a different way. I think a lot of times what happens is some of us should strategically consider being Republican in certain parts of the country where, you know, it's like they're just going to vote Republican, obviously. Those are the places you should get into, and then you should be that catalyst of change in that area, so that way, the person sitting in that position may be Republican, but they also are going to be a candidate that support your ideals.
Yeah, so I actually listened to an interview with
I.e. Robert Steele, Colin Powell. They were all Democrats. Right. They represented things that we cared about.
Right, they were Republican, but yeah.
Exactly.
And so I listened to an interview with Andrew Yang, and he actually said something interesting because whoever who was interviewing him asked him like, "Are you really a Democrat?" And he said, "No, but." You know, it's beneficial for me the way the system is set up. It's beneficial for me to run as a Democrat. And I'm really butchering and paraphrasing what he's saying, but basically. But
I've seen that interview. I know what you're referring to.
Yeah. So what he was talking about is that the way that the process is set up, it behooves me to run as a Democrat because if I ran as an independent, for example, I'm not going to get a lot of traction. I'm not going to be able to get my platform out there in a way that's impactful potentially. And also another point that you allude to, like to potentially like in a southern state, deep red state, being Republican, or registering as Republican or running Republican, that's an interesting thing because it also ties back to the other conversations we had. Because when you want to talk about urban development and things like and planning and things like that, well, the legislature approves the budgets that go into those types of investments, and the legislature also around the time of census draws the district lines. So if you have an all Republican or mostly Republican party who don't have your group of people's, be it black people or LGBTQ or whatever group that you care about, their best interest in mind, when they're drawing those district lines for the next 10 years, those lines are going to be drawn in a way that preserves their power. So if you're not represented in office at the time that's done, you're facing an uphill battle for the next 10 years just by design, by the way that the lines are even drawn.
And so sometimes we have to create our own plants, our own industry plants or whatever, and place those in the Republican Party. And say like, hey, and I do believe that strategy works in some places. And maybe that may not work here where people tend to vote Democrat and you have a closed primary.
Well, it does because, so 2 states, North Carolina and Maryland, 2 of the most heavily gerrymandered states in the country, both had pending cases in the Supreme Court, specifically around partisan gerrymandering. And Maryland is a deep red state. North Carolina is a trending red, or Maryland's a deep blue state. North Carolina is a trending red, but kind of purplish state. But a lot of it tends to still trend red because of how the lines are drawn. Because the people in power, when they're drawing the lines, they're going to always draw the lines in a way that benefits them. I believe in the Supreme Court opinion, what they talked about, it was drawn with such a surgical precision as to carve out African Americans in a way to dilute their voice and their vote.
And it's and the thing is, Chris actually made a comment towards voter suppression and how our votes matter. But then I think we need to understand that our votes can matter in various ways, and I think we need to be more strategic about and more cerebral in how we go about the voting process. It's not about saying you're a sellout because you voted this party. It's about saying like, no, as long as you go into a thing taking care of your people, how are you a sellout? It's like people coming at Kamala Harris saying she's a sellout because she was a prosecutor. But if you look at that record and show that she didn't like throw years on top of years to somebody that wasn't a thing, then did she not help out? Because at the end of the day, if you do commit a crime, there is some kind of recourse for the crime. My thing is, but why not be a black prosecutor that can help, as you said before, look at the potential of a person and not ruin their life over that one mistake, but give them a chance to bounce back from it.
And even if you're not a prosecutor, why wouldn't you want someone on the inside that empathizes with your story?
Exactly.
Like, so like with Kamala Harris, yeah, I think it's just misguided to say that she's a sellout because she chose this career path, when in fact having someone working on the inside, from the inside out. Here's the thing: the civil rights movement doesn't succeed without all of the aspects of the spectrum. So the way I learned about the civil rights movement was that it existed on a spectrum. So you don't have success with only the NAACP fighting in court. You have to have the NAACP fighting in the court. At the same time, you have to also have the Black Panther movement in the streets doing the grassroots work.
And then you need the Malcolm X's of the world. You need the Margaret. Right. You need the Garveys and all that stuff.
Right. All
aspects achieve a certain goal that eventually puts Barack Obama in the head of the country.
Right. And it leads to like advancing things forward in a way that's impactful for everyone and not just for your own personal agenda. So today, you need Black Lives Matter just as much as you need Black lawyers in the prosecutor's office that are going to be representing that same agenda. They represent the same agenda, they're just going about it in a different way, and that's okay. And
there's nothing wrong with unity. Like, you know, one person might be a Hebrew Israelite, another person may be FOI, another person may just be just Islamic in faith, someone else may be Christian, someone else may be atheist. Instead of all the infighting of feeling like who does it better, right? At the end of the day, a lot of us just want better education, we want better food and stuff for our community. We're all part of the same community. I think we can just find a way to work together. And keep in mind, that's something that TNGS has been about from the very beginning. It's not about exposing what the obvious or sometimes maybe not so obvious issues are, but it's also about saying like, look, here are some suggestions as to what we can do to redefine what the problem is, to fix the problem, and to go forward. And that's one thing I always appreciate about the TNGS community, and I feel like the people we bring onto the show embody people who want to help change. You've been very active in your community. You've supported activism in the community, and that's why it's been a pleasure having you on.
Yeah. Well, I stand on the shoulder of like people who are doing a lot of the work. So I would just say, you know, there's people like, or at least in Baltimore, so that I'm familiar with. Like there's the Job Opportunities Task Force, and they're some of the ones from a policy perspective who are doing a lot of work in Annapolis to get things like Ban the Box to become a reality, to get things like making sure that people who come out with records so that disproportionately affects Black men are able to have a fighting chance to get a job so that the recidivism rate is lowered and reduced. And then on the other side of that, you have people like So there's a young upstart. Her name is Angie Winder. She has you met Angie before.
Yeah.
So she has a nonprofit called Restoring the Village, and that so that's a very grassroots approach. And and now she's on the state central committee. So now she's getting into the policy perspective and the governing perspective. And so you have two very different approaches that are all fighting for the same path forward.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of an example that you can take, that people should take a look at. It doesn't have to be everyone doing the same thing, falling in the same line. But the Army, like in the Army, you have infantry, you have the generals that are strategizing, you may have the Navy that's doing their thing. It's all attacking, reaching the same goal, but from different points and different aspects.
Exactly. Look, man, Sven, it's been great having you on. We're about to get ready to wrap up.
Yeah.
It's about that time for us. But once again, appreciate you having you on. Always good to have some fresh ideas and thoughts. We've had tons of conversations, so this was a long time coming to have you on. We got to have you back again,
Sure.
just to continue more of these conversations. Once again, I want to thank everybody who's been following us, watching the show. Brent, I see that you logged on. That's what's up. So this has been great. Do you have a place on social media for people to follow you? Or if they want to see, I know you put some dope stuff up. I don't want to just put your stuff out there, but do you have a place where people can follow you if they want to, yell at you, make a comment?
Yeah, I mean,
jump in your DMs.
Not officially right now. I can be found on Facebook. Name is spelled Sven. But I don't really have like a Twitter handle or anything like that right now. So yeah, I mean, if you agree with me or if you disagree with me, you want to yell at me, that's fine. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Hit us up in the comments, and we always appreciate people for commenting. But if you're catching this on YouTube later, if you're on IG, if you're on Facebook, join these conversations at 8 p.m. live. We value your thoughts. We read all comments. However way y'all want to take it. So thanks for the fist pump, Brent. I appreciate that, sir. Get at me, man. Shoot me your number in the DMs because I need to holler at you. All right. But yeah, this has been another TNGS. It's your boy J. Costa. Captain is now off air at the moment. But y'all know together we are the Nitty Gritty. I'm going to let some of this Matt Martians fly. I think it's Pony Fly featuring Steve Lacy. The album was dope. And it's the Nitty Gritty and we out. We appreciate y'all. Y'all be blessed. Hey, it was great having you on, man.